talking a little Cincinnati Reds. The Reds will have their first spring training game of spring training coming up on Saturday, and that'll be at 3:30. So we'll have that right here in Dayton on 1410 ESPN Radio. Excited about that. I love being able to drive around and listen to Reds baseball again, whether it's watching it, listening to it. I'm just glad that we're getting back to that. This spring training, I know like preseason stinks. I don't care about preseasons and other sports. And baseball, I'm going to pay attention to spring training and the early goings, but you get to a certain point where you hit a wall and you're just like, okay, can we just get to opening day? But I do think because you have a unique team like this that has a lot of youth on it, I do believe, and obviously with the, a re-energized, a group of youth in this roster with the, addition of Terry Francona, I am kind of curious to see what kind of strides some of these young guys have made in the offseason. Coming off a disappointing season like last year, I'm not going to put too much stock into guys who underperform in spring, and I don't want to overreact to guys who are performing at a high level in spring. But it is nice just to kind of get back to talking about guys on the field versus what to anticipate once they get out there. And we'll have a chance for that this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic with the Reds right now because you feel like you know what you've got, but at the same time, you just have so many unanswered questions in your mind. And to finally get a resolve to some of those coming up in the next 30 days or so, it's gonna be big for all of us. We need answers regarding CES. I need to know personally. If he's able to hit great in the spring, I'm gonna feel so confident coming into the season. And you go around the pitching staff. I mentioned some of them yesterday. Graham Ashcraft. This is a guy that we think is just out, right? We think he's on the outs. He's going to be in the bullpen, or maybe not. Maybe he doesn't even start in the major league club. We don't know. But what we do know is that there's always a chance for him to be there, and there's so many chances for everybody else. There's a lot of young guys in this team, and the fact that we get to see them hopefully improve year after year is all I ask for, really. Just improve just a little bit. Do not regress. Noelvi Marte is the only one in that camp, at least in my mind right now, that's just gone backwards completely. But everybody else is trending in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that's really the hope at this point last year, too, is that everyone was trending in the right direction and it was going to be a great season. And that's really what I keep coming back to was last year a letdown of expectations? Yeah, it was. But why wouldn't I have the same faith in those guys this year if they're able to stay healthy that I had going into last season? It's not like we saw, with the exception of Noelvi, all these guys take a step back. We still believe that most of them, when healthy, will be that version that we believed could be a playoff team last year. And the Reds went out and made the additions somewhat necessary to improve the lineup. And the floor of the lineup is certainly better, though the ceiling might not be exactly where we want it to be. But I think it's an exciting team. And I know, you kind of said it right there, but I'll definitely be watching the first 2 or 3 spring training games before I realize it's spring training, the same way I do with the NFL preseason.
That's right.
You watch the first one because you're excited to have it back, and then you're like, I'll just wait till the real thing happens. But very excited to get back into the news and everything like that as well.
Ellie De La Cruz, Matt McClain, obviously Hunter Greene, Nick Lodolo. These seem to be a lot of the same players we keep talking about over and over and over. And obviously that's the way that they're going to be successful this year. But a lot of times the way that a team like the Reds is going to be successful, it's going to be them relying on names that we don't talk about in January, February, in the offseason, and all of a sudden the season gets here and it's like, holy crap, like this guy is one of the main reasons that they're having success, and we hope to be having that conversation. We'll send it to you guys on this. Like, what are some of the underrated names? What are some of the names for this Reds team that is going to be the key to their success that we're just not talking about enough, that we're not giving enough attention and credit to? What are some names right now that you believe are the most underrated Reds as we head into 2025?
One of the names I had, and last year I definitely did not give him any credit, and I probably should have given him a little bit more credit. Santiago Espinal is a guy, 118 games last year, didn't have a great batting average, didn't have a fantastic OBP. But down the stretch, when the Reds needed big hits, I felt like he was always there to at least put contact to the baseball. There's a lot of Reds, and I won't name names, that strike out at like a 40% clip. That's not Santiago Espinal. I think he's a guy this year that I'm going to have a lot of confidence in, not being an everyday player, but being a solid backup. And whenever you need something, I think he's going to be there to give it. He's not going to hit a clutch home run whenever you need one, or a grand slam in the bottom of the ninth. But if you need a base hit to maybe start a rally or something, I don't hate the fact that we have Santiago Espinal. Again, I probably made fun of him more times than I made fun of anybody else last year. But I think he's a player that not really anybody's talking about, and I think that he's a good guy for this team. He's a good backup. He's a good utility player. And if we didn't get Gavin Lux, he would be the main utility guy for our infield, right? We have Gavin Lux now, so he's going to be everywhere. But I think Santiago Espinal heading into this year, though he won't play probably significant time, he's going to contribute. He's a pretty damn good defender, and offensively he's going to give you just enough. Never strikes out, ever. So if you need to run the contact play, our favorite play in baseball, Santiago Espinal is your guy. That's my first name.
I think my first name is a guy that wasn't here last year. It's a free agency addition that a lot of people have talked more poorly about than great about, but it's Austin Hayes. And did we want a bigger name outfielder in Cincinnati? Sure, that would have been great. It's fun to project those things. But Austin Hayes on a 1-year cheap bargain deal to come to Cincinnati after a year where he was ravaged by injuries, after 2023 when he was an all-star with 16 home runs and nearly a 330 OBP, that's a guy in our outfield that can really change the course of this team. When you're replacing, the litany of AAA players we saw play in the outfield last year with a guy that's an all-star the last time he was completely healthy, I think if Austin Hayes can return to 2023 form, he can be a real key piece to the Reds. And not, even if he doesn't get all the way there, if he's close to that, then what a great signing that was. And that could be the outfielder that we wanted for so long and some think we still don't have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the Austin Hayes pick right there, mainly because it wasn't the sexy name that we all wanted. Now, a lot of that goes back to Nick Krall coming out and saying that was going to be their number one goal this offseason was to address that need, and they didn't necessarily do that. Austin Hayes was kind of like we kicked the tires on a lot of big-name outfielders, or at least high-quality outfielders throughout the offseason. They couldn't pull the trigger or get the deal done with any of these guys, so Austin Hayes, I think in the eyes of Reds fans, we almost feel like we just settled for Austin Hayes. But the bottom line is, for every point you just made, if he returns to that form, is he going to be an all-star outfielder? No, but we just need a guy that's going to produce, because if we're just relying on him to hit the ball to the ballpark, this team's not going to be very good. But he needs to hit the ball to the ballpark, as well as Candelario, as well as Tyler Stevenson. Ellie's power numbers need to improve. There's a lot of guys that need to contribute in that department. Defensively, obviously, is going to be very key as well. This was a bad defensive team last year, and I think that they've slowly addressed that as well. I think they've improved defensively from last year to this as well. I like the Austin Hayes pick. I'm going to roll with TJ Friedl. I think Friedl does not get talked about enough either, because if you go back to last year when he was in the lineup, a lot of times he was one of the more consistent hitters that the Reds had, and in his absence, it really threw off the dynamic of the outfield. You had guys playing in spots that they're not comfortable playing. He also was a good quality leadoff hitter at times when they used him in that role as well. And then defensively, and then you could tell how much the production dipped off when he was out of the lineup. I think TJ Friedl is one of those straws that kind of stirs the drink. We don't talk about him a lot. He's not going to, be in any major highlights on SportsCenter or anything like that. But I think TJ Friedl is a very underrated Red as well. Some name to keep an eye on, because if everyone's doing their job, if Austin Hayes comes in and makes a splash, if Lux is a great utility player, if Candelario's power numbers go up, if Stevenson repeats what he did last year, Ellie takes that next step. Obviously, Matt McClain, if he's healthy and picking up where he left off after his rookie campaign, TJ Friedl is just going to be that cherry on top of what could be a special season for this Reds team. I'm going to go with TJ Friedl in this conversation.
I like that name a lot. I think TJ Friedel's a guy that the Reds, if he plays up to the way he played 2 years ago, this is going to be a better outfield than we all think. Because as of right now, I think collectively all of our thoughts on the outfield is that it's pretty underwhelming. And that's
he was almost a 4-WAR player in 2023.
Yeah.
He was a 3.8 B-WAR in 2023.
He didn't ground into a double play, I don't think. Is that the real stat in a full season? So it's absolutely incredible.
Zero ground into double plays in how many plate appearances? 556 plate appearances.
That's just insane. That's just insane. I love TJ Friedl a lot. Last year I know he was banged up and we didn't get to see the full TJ Friedl experience. This year I'm hoping we do, because again he is the centerpiece to our outfield. And he makes it go for sure. I want to give another player, and I hate to steal it. I hate to steal it from our guy Sam LeCure, but Tyler Stevenson, coming into last season, I had no faith in. I didn't think he was a catcher. I thought he was going to be moving around DH first base. The argument with that was he probably wasn't a good enough hitter to do that. So it's like, all right, you really got to work on your catching behind the plate, and he did. I think he got way better. His framing was better. His defense was better. Everything about it was better. Everything about him was better last year. And if Tyler Stevenson's able to improve upon that this year, we're gonna have a bona fide top 10 catcher in Major League Baseball. I already think we do, and maybe that even goes up from there. He had 19 home runs last season. If he's able to somehow hit, I mean, I don't expect him to hit 30 home runs. If he's able to hit over 20 home runs a year, that's an offensive weapon, right? And I think that's a guy that the Reds absolutely need to be good. Not to mention, as we have an ever-growing young pitching core that keeps coming up in our system, having a veteran catcher that's able to work with them. And I think that was the fear, too. You know, I felt like a lot of guys 2 years ago preferred the other options over Tyler Stevenson. I think now Tyler Stevenson is the premier option. I think the pitchers like him. I think he's done a great job. And I think he gets, you know, I will give Hunter Greene all the credit in the world. Nick Lodolo, we'll give all these guys all the credit in the world. Tyler Stevenson gets credit for that as well. I mean, he's also calling the game. So I think this is a guy that a lot of people are going to be sleeping on still, including myself probably. But I think he's going to improve. I think he's only just going to get better from here. He had a 340 on base percentage last year. I mean, the guy was flat out good. And I think the Reds, if I remember, I don't remember the exact number, but the Reds were like, I mean, I think 30 games or 20 games worse when he wasn't playing, when he wasn't on the field. That's a significant number. Like that's not a rounding error. That's not a mistake.
Right.
That's blatantly you don't have your better catcher out on the field. I understand that catchers can't start every single game, and hopefully Tyler, at least if he's not catching, plays significantly more time at DH. He had 100. He played in 138 games last year. Had 515 plate appearances. He did his job, and that's a name next year or this year, excuse me. I'm very, very excited to see grow.
I think last year was an awesome step, and it's kind of what we thought he could have turned into after the start of his career. The offensive powerhouse at catcher, and he took a bigger step than I ever would have expected defensively, which is great, but probably useless in the next couple of years. So kudos to him for trying so hard to get better at framing and everything like that while ABS is, on the way. But my other pick is a guy that is less of a numbers improvement and more of a feeling improvement. If you look at Alexis Diaz's numbers last year, they're not terrible. They're certainly not as bad as it feels, but you lost that feeling as Reds fans that you had in 22 and 23, that when he got out there, the game was over. Mm-hmm. No one was going to get on base. No, he was going to strike him out. The game was over. That wasn't the case last year. He was bumpy, still got the job done more often than not, was a serviceable reliever, but there were have been questions this offseason about whether or not he's going to be the full-time closer. And that would have been crazy to say a couple years ago with what we were watching from him. So if he can return to that form and be that lockdown closer, we can always debate how much a closer really means to the team and whether, it's more beneficial to just pitch him, against the meat of the lineup in different places rather than saves. But I think, having a closer that's absolutely nails is such a big piece for the team and the fan base to have confidence at the end of games, end of close games where you have a small lead and you can just send a guy in from the pen and say, this one's over. We're going to win it. So I think if Alexis Diaz can return to that form, it'll really help a young team in terms of confidence late in close games.
This name's a little different as far as like an underrated name, but I do believe if this individual plays at a high level, and again, the highest level he's ever played at was still, he hit about 250 in that range, and I think at the most had about 50 RBIs one season. But I think the backup catcher for the Reds in Trevino, I think is a very underrated name to keep an eye on, because if he could provide stability to where you could put him in the lineup and count on him to get some big quality hits throughout the season, and especially in high leverage moments throughout the year. If he plays really well, that's going to allow the Reds to keep Tyler Stevenson in the lineup more times than not throughout the season in regards to DH and that type of thing. And I think if you don't have a good quality backup catcher and you don't want to have to go to him if you don't have to, that's going to put a lot of pressure on Tyler Stevenson. The only time he's in the lineup is when he's catching. And the reason I say that is because I do see almost a conflict potentially brewing, not between Tyler Stevenson and Gavin Lux, but between opportunities between Tyler Stevenson and Gavin Lux, because Gavin Lux had an interview yesterday and let it be known that he doesn't really care what his role is as long as he's getting at bats, as long as he's getting hits. And at times, it's going to be interesting to see who's in that DH role throughout the season. So I know I tailed away a little bit there, but to bring it back, I like Trevino, and they brought him in to be the backup catcher. He's a veteran backup catcher as well, so I think that helps. You're not relying on calling up a catcher from your system and just hoping that he gets it as the season goes on. This is a guy that has a lot of experience. He's played with the Yankees. He obviously has major league at bats. I think having a veteran backup pitcher like that is huge. And I think that the better he is, the better Tyler Stevenson could be, because the Reds will be able to utilize Stevenson more in other avenues than just catcher. So I'm going to go at Trevino in this conversation.
Elite defensive catcher, too.
Yeah.
Gold glove. So absolutely gives you a lot more flexibility moving Stevenson to the DH. And that's kind of the pro of having guys like Lux in the lineup, even guys like McLean and Steer that can play a lot of other positions, is if you have, two guys that are hot, and Gavin Lux and Tyler Stevenson and Jose Trevino's playing great at catcher, you can move those guys around and keep the hot bats in the lineup. So the versatility the Reds, added by having a real backup catcher, no offense to Luke Mailey, but having a real major league backup catcher, that gives them so much more of flexibility throughout the season.
Last year, the Reds were missing that guy so much, and they just didn't have it. Austin Wins, I think, was good in his 5 games. There was
like 2 doubles.
Yeah, I think so. there was just so many backup catchers they had last year, and just none of them really panned out. So hopefully Trevino is a guy that's going to be able to at least give Tyler some sort of consistency when he's not there. I'm going to give one more name just because I think that this is somebody who could be way better than any of us think that he is. Jake Fraley has played 6 seasons in Major League Baseball. His debut was 2019. He played 12 games in 2019. He played 7 in 2020. So I'll just throw those 2 seasons out of the window. 4 seasons he's been in Major League Baseball. He has been somebody that's at least solid. Last year was bad. I can't believe he played more games than he did in 2023. But he was dealing with a lot of stuff. He was probably hurt for most of the year. He was dealing with a lot of stuff behind the scenes. I don't put any stock into what he was last year, and everybody made fun of him. He was the singles merchant. Well, I think this year he's going to take that step up. He had 15 home runs in 2023. I think you're going to see more of that this year. I'll be interested to see how the dynamic works because, you have Jacobs' guy Austin Hayes out there. We don't know who else is going to be in the outfield. Especially, I expect the wiggle room to be less. If you're not contributing against right-handed pitching this season, if you're Jake Fraley, I don't know if he's going to have a spot. I hope he does, and I think he will. But if Jake Fraley is going to be able to be the 2023 Red that he was, again, the Reds' outfield just better than we think it is. As of right now, we're saying that we're underwhelmed with it. I think there's still a chance that the outfield is going to be fine this year.